We're off and running. Good evening. I call the March 23rd work session to order. And the first order of business is a consideration of the work session and regular meeting agendas. Do I have a motion?
Mayor Claffey, I have a motion to move. I move to approve the work session agenda and the regular meeting agenda as presented.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second. Michelle and I will second that.
A joint seconding. Very good. All right. Mr. Kesker.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Miss Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Miss Edwards,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Very good. And number 2 and B is the biggie that we've all been anxiously awaiting for, the presentation of the proposed fiscal year 2024 budget by the city manager, Ms. Beauregard.
I'll let Mr. Kesker get the screen down. And we do have a PowerPoint tonight. First, I want to thank everybody behind me. Thanks to all the staff, department heads, all the support. This is great. Thank you. All right. Here we go. So the purpose of tonight is to introduce the budget. And actually during the regular meeting, we obviously have the public hearing on the tax rate, on the real estate tax rate, and then Ms. Moyers will introduce the budget ordinance, just an introduction. Obviously we'll entertain questions, but we have several work sessions coming up too. So there'll be lots of time for you all to ask questions, and we'll be building those work sessions. And a lot of that topic will be what we hear tonight from you all in terms of your thoughts and ideas about the budget going forward. So with that, for the fiscal year 24 budget, the total budget is $152.3 million for all funds. That's general fund and every fund. That's 9.4 million, or a 6.6% increase over fiscal year 23. And just for the general fund, which is the fund most people care the most about because that's where the everyday operations of the city are funded, it's 69.2 or 4.1 million and 6.25% over fiscal year 23. So significant themes when we were developing the budget, first and foremost, education. And as you all remember, last summer, City Council and the school board approved a funding formula. This budget fully honors that funding formula. Secondly, this budget focuses on future needs, such as future capital needs. You're going to hear a lot about that tonight. And focusing in particular on the city's borrowing capacity and affordability. And we know that there's some large capital projects coming up. So this budget is a heavy focus on that. Earlier this month, you reaffirmed your strategic goal areas. So we'll be touching on that in several places. This budget also addresses employee wages and partially implements a compensation study that was done in 2022. And I'll talk about that later as well. It's also mindful of the residents. We know that things aren't easy right now. We are just coming out, we're fine. I feel like we've come out of the health pandemic, but now we've got inflation, interest rates limit borrowing for folks. And now we have the possibility of a recession. So I'll talk about that as well. But this budget still continues to provide the levels of services that our citizens do enjoy and expect. And this is not the time, we don't think, to reduce those services. So this budget doesn't do any of that. So this is just a one-pager of those strategic areas that you reaffirmed last month, and we'll be coming back to you with a report on that in the near future. And next, so after we do that, council will take these strategic areas and we'll operationalize them into the departmental work plans, and we'll provide you progress updates on that as we go along. There's several other areas that this budget touches, for instance, infrastructure and built environment. You're going to hear about future debt strategies, long-term financial planning, and an elevated role the CIP will need to play in upcoming budget cycles. And we weren't able to address everything in this current budget, but we do believe this starts a long-term strategy that will address these future needs of the city. Also, it addresses economic development in the West End and you'll hear a lot about that as well. Most notably that under economic development, we're going to propose an organizational structure change in that department related to community development so that staff can more effectively address these council priority issues. And finally, responsive efficient government. We're going to talk about the compensation that we really do need to keep working hard at attracting and retaining quality employees who provide the services to our community. So you'll hear these themes tonight. Here's the total revenues. This is just a graphical representation, 152.3 million. I'm just going to go quickly through these. And general fund revenues. Again, this is where the city services for the most part are funded. The general property taxes is obviously almost half of that. So that's 48%, and that's comprised of real estate and personal property. So I know the big question on everybody's mind is what are we doing with the real estate tax rate? This budget has an 89 cent per $100 assessed value tax rate. That is a reduction of 3 cents. 1 cent is 287, 261. So per penny, that's what you get for that. We recognize that there was a significant increase in assessments, 25.2%, not including new construction. And so we realized this could cause a hardship on homeowners. But at the same time, we're still, again, I want to reiterate also that on top of that, we're not reducing anything else, and we're not changing any other taxes and fees in this budget. We know in the future, we're going to have to definitely look at water and stormwater. You all have already heard about that. And so we'll definitely be coming back to council as we begin the FY25 budget process to talk about those two items, but there's significant capital needs behind those two items. But in 24, none of those other taxes or fees change. So under general fund revenues, this just highlights some of the major changes to those revenues: sales tax, transient occupancy, meals tax, and VPOL, and personal property tax revenue. Local taxes remain strong. Personal property tax, after a strong showing, is starting to show some pre-pandemic trends and is starting to normalize a little bit. And then under state and federal, those are both decreasing, mainly due to reduced projections for health and welfare services, and that's commensurate with service needs. Do you want to talk at all about revenues, or you want to wait? Okay, I know Jessie has some additional information about revenues that she can share after I'm finished with the presentation. This is just a chart, a graph showing total expenditures for all funds, and you can see the largest portion is personal services, which is our employees. That is not surprising. And under general fund expenditures, you have public safety is the biggest piece of the pie, slightly higher than education, but education is still the single largest expenditure. Remember, public safety has many departments in it. It has many outside agencies such as the jail and the detention center. And so it may be a little bit larger, but it also is comprised of many more functional areas, whereas education is just a single functional area. So I'll get into some of the details on the expenditures. And the first one is that this budget phases implementation of a compensation study that was done in 2022. And again, this is also tied to the strategic area of responsive and efficient government. We need to continue to maintain a stable and proficient workforce and to be in a position to do that. And the goal of the compensation study was to provide a foundation for an appropriate classification and compensation system and a pay plan based on current compensation levels for similar public sector employers, municipalities, and local market competitors. So it looked at a lot. So based on that, effective July 1st, we'll be providing a 5% cost of living increase to all full and part-time employees. And then there'll also be targeted adjustments that bring employees up to a new minimum salary range, and there will be compression adjustments where needed. So those are the two big items that came out of the compensation study that we could afford to do. And again, going forward, we're going to be continuing to look at that compensation study throughout the years and try to implement more of that as we move into future fiscal years. As you're aware, police and fire received adjustments this current year, which we had to do because in the case of the police department, we were a neighboring locality was outpacing us, and we couldn't, we knew we'd have trouble if we tried to recruit for the academy and couldn't recruit at that same level. So we increased their starting pay from 44,100 to 47,000, excuse me, 44,100 to 47,000. In fire, it's in the case of this fire, we moved them from 40,000 to 42,000. This is more of a question or a case of retention. And we believe our competitive edge would have been diminished if someone did leave for a neighboring locality with a higher starting pay. So those adjustments were done in 23, and they of course will carry over into 24. Health insurance is another factor in terms of this budget. There's a 10% increase for the city and for employee paid premiums. We don't normally like to pass along increases to employees, but sometimes we just can't avoid it. And we wouldn't want to not do it and then have a larger increase the following year in case the trends don't reverse themselves and we continue to have large claims. So we just take that year by year. And if there is a chance we could reduce the premiums for employees, we would try to do that. Because these paid premiums, the premiums don't kick in until January 1st, 2024. So we'll have costs by then to see if that can be adjusted. But for now, it's a 10% increase. I mentioned education, and again, they are fully funded. The total transfer from the city is 15.97 million. That's a 23% increase. The increase from this year is $900,000 and some change. Their total budget is 46.6 million, an increase of 3 million over 23. And their outstanding general fund debt service is 45.6 million, which represents 80% of total debt. So now we're going to get into some of the functional areas, and we're going to start with public safety, which has an increase of 1.2 million. The major drivers here is the citywide compensation package and healthcare costs. And then the annualization of the adjustments made to police and fire. Under Middle River Regional Jail, that is going up over $231,000 and is attributable to a higher population of inmates from the city of Staunton, which then increase our share of the jail combined with the decline of inmate populations from other localities. For the Juvenile Detention Center, the increase is over $222,000. This is a little bit more complicated. This is a result of severing ties with the Office of Refugee Resettlement Program that provided significant federal dollars to the center. The issue here has been that the center has continued to have challenges returning to pre-COVID levels. And the limited number of staff they can get has not been able to focus on the core mission of the Juvenile Detention Center to actually focus on our local youth. And some of that has been exacerbated by staff being repeatedly assaulted and injured by youth in the ORR program. In this case, the center is going to be using 35% of their fund balance in fiscal year 24 to help member jurisdictions ease the financial burden. And so this will increase again next year once the full realization is understood as to the loss of the federal revenue. But to be honest, it's probably more in line with what other localities pay to run a juvenile center. So you'll see another increase next year. I don't know what that amount will be, but this will be phased in through a couple of years until we're at that normalization point again. Under the Animal Services Center, that's an increase of over $89,000. A lot of that is due to additional staff that's been added, such as kennel and facilities attendants, transitioning certain positions from part-time to full-time where needed, and then the expansions of their current office space that includes a rental fee. And we hope this increase will continue to stabilize and improve operations at the shelter. The new shelter won't be online until fiscal year 25, so I'm sure we'll see some other costs that will occur when that shelter transition happens for that fiscal year. And then under the police department, there's an additional $65,000 to purchase new emergency dispatch software that will interface with the computer-aided dispatch. And this is the software that walks 911 dispatchers through the steps when someone is having a medical emergency. And it's needed because it's not supported anymore. Under health and welfare, there's a decrease of $538,000. A lot of that is the decrease in the city's share of public assistance. Our percentage went down for social services, our share from 28.85 to 25.45%. And then projections for Children's Services Act are expected to decrease by 150,000 as overall costs for Staunton have leveled with fewer children coming into care and others exiting due to either successful reunification or adoption. We don't expect that to decrease anymore because the children that are left in the system have some pretty complicated issues. And so we don't expect that number to go down anymore, but 150,000 is projected in savings for next year. For the health department, this increase is due to the city's share of a 5% salary increase, cost increases to the employee benefit program, and the increased cost of providing services due to inflation. And then for the Community Services Board, the request we received was for $247,000 was to stand up a crisis receiving crisis stabilization unit. And the state, we've been told, is going to cover their psychiatric services in 2024, which is the area the city's contribution is historically supported. This facility, a facility like this is highly desirable, but we have many questions about the cost and how the facility will be paid for, and estimates that have been shared are between $5 and $15 million, depending on whether it's a renovation or a building. So staff is going to be reviewing this information very carefully, and you will be receiving updates on this as we move through that. But for now, the full amount is in the budget. So we'll have to make some decisions down the road about that.
Excuse me, Leslie,
Yes,
the full
ma'am.
amount of,
$247,000. And that was their full request. And that is representing the 10% share that we're required to fund CSBs. But instead of applying it to their operating budget, they want to apply it to a future crisis stabilization unit, which is different than their previous requests, previous years. Under community development, this again focuses on the strategic areas of economic development, the West End, and responsive efficient government. The main drivers, besides the citywide compensation package, is that we are proposing a new position, a director of community development. Currently, the current director serves both economic and community development departments, and having department head for each would focus on these, would mean that these two positions would focus on those distinct areas and would be more efficient. And it would also, work you towards making strides toward those goals that you just reaffirmed in the areas of economic development, responsive efficient government, and the West End. So we believe having this additional department head would do all of that. And again, help you meet those goals sooner by having a person focused on that, on each of those alone. Under general government, we have several drivers here, citywide compensation package, but there's also an attrition savings of $300,000 budgeted up front, which is basically the savings the city expects to receive from vacant positions. But that's also offset by a portion of the compensation adjustments that are budgeted in the finance department's budget. Another driver is that an accounting technician in the water fund was moved to the general fund after Ms. Moyers looked further at that and decided that that position wasn't doing a lot of work in the water fund. So that's why it was decided to move it back into the general fund, because that position is doing more work on the general fund side of the finance department. There's also an additional $22,000 for firefighter physical exams. And frankly, the cost of publishing legal ads and notices is incredibly expensive. So we added $17,000 for that, which was a huge increase for the clerk's budget, but we have to pay these. We don't have an option. These are the legally required notices that have to be published. Under public works, the increase is $169,000, and that's mostly because of the compensation package and healthcare costs. In the water fund, which is not in the general fund, but I just wanted to bring this up, the Virginia Department of Health has changed staffing requirements for Class 1 water work. So they are requiring that it be staffed 24/7. That means that we will need 4 additional operators, and they've said it's okay to phase this in. So for 24, we've included 2 additional operators, and in 25, we're going to include 2 more. And the Department of Health has said this approach is fine. We can do that. But that's in the water fund, and the water fees support those positions. Under Recreation, Parks, and Libraries, an increase of $232,000, again, driven by the compensation package. And we have included $30,000 to replace the trees at the wharf, which are destroying the infrastructure of the curbs and the bricks. They're not the best trees to have planted, and they need to be replaced. And we've had a plan for this for a couple of years now. And so when we get close to that, we'll make sure that gets shared and communicated out really, so that people understand what's happening, that the trees will be replaced. I think actually with the same number of trees, but different trees. As far as the capital improvement plan, you've seen this before. There's a few changes I want to point out though, that this list should look very familiar. I just want to say in terms of the FY23 carryover, to help balance this budget, originally we had 1.3 million as a general fund transfer. That is now 0. And we will anticipate and hope, I think we will have enough carryover, I don't really doubt that portion of the CIP will be funded with carryover from the current fiscal year that we're in. And so you can see the projects that have already been funded through FY22 carryover, and then the ones that will be funded once that carryover is appropriated at the end of this calendar year. And then that list continues on this page. So it's over $2.2 million that of carryover that we will be using at the end of 23 to fund this portion of the capital budget. And then we have several other projects, one from capital reserves for the Churchville pedestrian corridor improvements, and then 2 Virginia Department of Transportation revenue sharing. These will be city administered programs. That's why they're listed here. The one that's got the asterisk is the one we just heard about the pedestrian signals and crosswalks. So this was added to the CIP now that we know that we're receiving this funds, that this is a project that we will actually be doing. So that's a little bit different than what you saw in January. Under the debt service sinking fund, we have 6.16 million in funds transferred. It's broken out a couple of different ways. One is a 5.5 or almost a $5.6 million transfer from the general fund to the debt sinking fund. 5.36 of this fully funds the city's responsibility for what is currently owed by the city and helps keep the sinking fund solvent. And then 232,000 is for future debt issuance. And this is years after relying on those funds to help balance the budget. And they were cut. As you know, you heard from Davenport in January, we had cut it down to $4.4 million, and that just was not sustainable. There's an additional $570,000 in anticipation of future debt issuance. And again, the exact amount is yet to be determined for known capital projects, such as separation of the Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court from Augusta County. Didn't mean to put domestic twice there. This is not the ideal way we'd like to fund this, but and if we identify another source, we will. But for now, this is coming out of the debt service sinking fund, the 570. So budgets are about choices. And you'll, in the next month, you're going to be making some choices after I finish this budget presentation and we start working through the work sessions. I already talked about how we eliminated the 1.3 million from the CIP that would be funded with carryover. New department requests remain unfunded, and it was over 532,000 in new or upgraded positions and enhanced benefits, and more than 801,000 in operational expenses. I already talked about the attrition savings and the $570,000 that is coming from the debt service sinking fund. So I want to end on a good note. This is really exciting. We have a lot of accomplishments this past year. We completed the demolition at Staunton Crossing. The city received several economic grants to support economic development efforts in the downtown area, including the $4.5 million that we most recently received for Staunton Crossing for the wastewater improvements over there, the $99,000 that we just received to help revitalize the steam plant, And then the second year of the $300,000 Brownfields assessment grant for the West End. On the Richmond Avenue corridor, we had home to several new businesses. Micah's Coffee, Express Car Wash, Primary Care, Centera Primary Care, and then several businesses relocated to Staunton Crossing, such as Wendy's and Waffle House. In downtown and near downtown, several new businesses were opened or moved, such as Bears and Blankets at their new location, New Space for Gloria's, Sweet Addie's is new, Remedy Burger, Slide. I mean, this is a great list here. It's really exciting to see all these businesses thrive this past year. Another thing I wanted to point out was, I know, we're focusing on stormwater. We will be focusing more on that in the next year to looking at the fees and such and the plan for that. So this is exciting. We have software coming online that will operate the 9 flood sensors and gauges. And this will help provide information for the best locations for flood mitigation practices, for example. So that's really exciting. And then we got named, Staunton was named the South's best mountain town of 2022, one of the best Southern mountain towns for retirement, and one of America's most historic streets, and that was Beverly Street. And then finally, we're the 4th year as a HUD entitlement community. And again, we're receiving over $300,000 to help low to moderate income families and improve infrastructure projects in their neighborhoods. Not surprisingly, the finance department has again secured the GFOA Distinguished Budget Award for the FY23 budget and the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence for Financial Reporting in FY22. So no surprise there. In closing, I just took this quote from my message. We need to plan what's ahead of us. And we believe, me and staff that helped put this together, and I think everybody behind me, that this does help prepare for the future. I mean, I get everything everybody wants, but I think it sets us in a good position to look at our future needs and to assess what those are. And so I feel like this does that. Finally, we have several ways folks can participate and look at the budget document. We have it online, or it will be posted online after this presentation. We also have hard copies upstairs on the 3rd floor in the city manager's office and in the library in the reference section. You can't check that out, but you can look at it. People can contact city council, and there's your email, and the 3810 number is the clerk of council's phone number. We have several public meetings and work sessions in April, the 6th, 13th, 27th, and 27th, which is the budget adoption date. And this evening, you have the real estate tax rate public hearing, and April 13th is the overall budget public hearing. Oh, there's how to participate. And with that, my presentation is finished, and we would be happy to answer any questions. And if we can't answer them this evening, we will, like I said, we'll be planning the work sessions out and what the agendas for those are, seeing what kind of questions you all have and what kind of issues you want to talk about. And we've got Ms. Moyers is here, obviously, to answer questions as well. So we'll be happy to answer questions and
Mr. Mayor,
take your comments.
Members of council, Mr. Robertson.
several little questions. One, you may not know the answer to this one, but health insurance, you talked about an increase for 10% for the city and employee paid premiums. How much is dollar figure wise that 10%?
that.
Do you know that?
I do. So it depends on the plan you're in. But if you're in the city's most expensive plan, which is the family point of service plan, it goes from 307 to 338. All right, I don't believe I remembered that. So that's a month.
Per month, right?
It's $15 a pay period. Thank you.
50?
15.
15.
15 additional
Yeah.
dollars a pay period
15 per
every
pay
2
period.
weeks.
Okay,
So that's for the people on the most expensive pay plan. And obviously it would vary depending on which plan you're on.
okay.
Yep.
Next one, you stated that 45.6 million from the education fund, that $45.6 million represents 80% of the total debt of the city of Stanton due to the
General fund.
the
debt.
general
Yeah,
fund,
not including the other.
due to the
funds.
Stanton school system.
Due to the high school. That's the main driver for that.
Okay.
Correct.
You made another statement. I wanted it, I heard it, but it was quickie. You said something, but, I think you said we were reimbursed some, but you said I think it through the regional jail, the refugee program,
That's for the juvenile detention center.
the juvenile detention.
Correct. So the ORR program provided federal dollars to the center to house that program for those youths. The center is separating for that for the reasons that I mentioned earlier. I think overall it was 2 million in revenue overall for the shelter. Not the shelter, the center. Does that sound right? So it's significant. So the jurisdictions that participate in the center have to split that up and figure out where that 2 million is going to come from.
Mhm.
So our increase for 24 is about 235,000 and some change. But at the same time, the center is using 35% of its fund balance to fund the remainder of where that gap is.
Mhm.
When I last spoke to Mr. Showalter, he said, we will need time to figure out what the actual budget could be. I mean, it could change in terms of the $2 million. There could be some fluctuation there. So we'll have more information this time next year about what that final cost could be for the jurisdictions. But this is our best effort right now in terms of figuring out what those increases will be and what that impact will be from that loss of revenue.
I just heard the word refugee and I wanted to make sure that.
That was the ORR program that I was referring to,
Okay.
correct?
That we weren't having refugees through the night and, okay, good enough.
Well, these are youths, so
What does
Use.
ORR stand for?
Office of Refugee Resettlement.
So why are they referring to, American youths as refugees? mean,
I don't know the answer to that.
They're not.
Why is it called that?
These are federal
They're-
prisoners, not local.
Yeah,
If we,
Okay.
and wasn't the per day cost of housing the federal, didn't we get a lot more money to fund to?
it was over $2 million
That went to the.
that went
yeah,
to the center to support this
that
program.
Out of how many dollars total went to the program?
For their budget, I don't have that number in front of me. It was a lot, though. I think, and Ms. Moyers can correct me, if we had absorbed this entire increase for 24, it would have been over $500,000 impact to the city
Right.
rather than something that's in the budget now.
And the program is 100% shut down. I mean, there's no more.
I believe so. They've been
So
working
there's
their
no
way through
future
that.
Money's coming in for this.
No, sir. This is it. We will only be taking in our local youths.
That's all my questions right now, for right now.
You're just getting started. Fellow councilmen, do we have any questions?
I have a few of,
Terry's got some.
the raises for the fire and rescue and police. Does that also cover the sheriffs?
No, sir. The sheriffs will receive the same compensation package that I spoke about earlier, just like city employees. So they'll receive the 5% on July 1st. And then
And no raise in
there
there.
could be some other adjustments if there's some minimum requirements that need to be met to meet the new salary structure and then the compression.
And the raises for the police and fire, does that go up the ladder or is it just for?
Well, all we did for this current fiscal year was adjust the starting pay. And then everything would be built off of that after that.
And you were saying that there was a decrease in our state and federal health. Why would that be?
So I get more information on that, but that's tied directly to the services that are being provided. And I mentioned, and I can get more information on that if you're interested. In particular, the Children's Services Act. It's very hard to project what that will be, But City of Stanton's the needs there for Stanton in particular have decreased. But if you, I can get more information on that if you'd like, and just kind of draw that, draw that out a little bit more, because it's a big decrease.
That's a good
Yes.
thing.
Yeah, and it's not a bad thing. And I forgot to say that Medicaid is actually increasing, but there's no local dollars with that. So that's not a bad thing.
I just didn't know if it had maybe had something to do with all the funds that the government had been giving out for people because of COVID.
Yeah, let me get some more information on that, and I'm happy to provide a little bit more detail on that.
And you said vacant positions. Do we have citywide, do we have a lot of vacant positions?
I don't have
Which-
that information in front of me. I know that Public Works, for instance, probably, I think they have a routine vacancy list. I think police is doing a little bit better, actually. I don't have those numbers in front of me right now, but that's something else we can,
Yeah, I would like to
Yeah.
know maybe if we could break it down by, kind of by department and have some idea if some people are worse off than others. And then we're going to have to put on 4 additional employees for the water department.
yes, that's correct. And in
What-
24, we have
Do we have any
2.
idea what they would cost per hire? Would it be 40,
Do you have
50,
that
60,000?
We might have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're interested in, I'm sorry? Oh,
I don't know what's going on.
okay. We'll get back.
But that
we'll-
will come out, of the water fund.
Correct, yeah.
Then,
Vice Mayor Dorn, are you done, Terry? You got
I'm
another?
looking, just make sure, I made a
Okay.
couple of notes and sometimes I can't read my notes. And then, I'll bring this up in the meeting when we go back in the back, because I don't know if I can talk about that yet.
Okay.
Okay.
I have questions.
Vice Mayor Dorn?
Ms. Beauregard, can you expand on this new Director of Community Development position and explain more, like exactly what this position's going to be responsible
Sure.
for compared to how it's currently set up?
So the position as it's set up now is responsible for planning, zoning, building, codes. I mean, all the functions that are within community development. But it's one person doing community development and economic development. So this split would mean that we have a distinct person for economic development and then one department head for community development that would be over those functions. So the functions what they would be over doesn't change than what this individual is over right now. But now we have a person who can just focus on community development. But we're not suggesting changing the organizational structure of community development in any way. Nothing would leave that and go someplace else, for instance. Everything that's over there now would remain there. But that department would have its own department head that is just over community development. And then we'd have a department head over economic development solely.
And then would this director have other full-time positions that report to just community development?
Yes, so there's positions within community development that every position in community development would report to that department head. So every staff member that sits in that office right now would report to that department head.
How many is that?
I don't know. She can look real quick. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head.
We have people in that department that are doing shared duty, some economic and some.
I don't believe that to be the case, but I'm not entirely sure. 11.
Included in that would be, it looks like 5 positions under the planning office.
What about Kim Cormier, the secretary? Wouldn't she be a shared position?
She is, no, she's shared with economic development and tourism. So she would remain as she would remain under that umbrella.
In the current plan, we have 5 in planning, 3 in economic development, and 3 in tourism.
There's other in community development, though, more than 5 planners.
think Mr. Vaughn wants to say
Come up
something.
here, please. Thank
Please.
you. You can probably speak to this quicker.
Kim is shared with Economic Development and Tourism. She's not a part of Community Development. In Community Development, there are 11 people. We have Planning and Zoning. Rodney oversees Planning and Zoning Division. And then within that, there's Tim, Linda, and Jay. And then we have Environmental, Pete Kessiker. You know that guy? And Willow in Environmental. And then in Building Inspections, we have John Glover, who's Division Head. And then we have a Plan Reviewer and 2 inspectors. Is that 11?
Close.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
And Jay is,
And Mary.
and
did you say
Mary
Yeah.
who does property maintenance.
So there's 12.
11.
There will also be the housing planner under
Correct,
community
yeah.
development.
Yes, the housing planner falls under community development.
And so from my perspective, I wear both hats now, but within the next year, I'll be retiring. And so there will be a need to have a community development director and an economic development director. You're getting good bang for your bucks right now.
Always questionable.
It's on the record.
But it 2 separate departments, they're always standalone. And in this particular case, it just simply has the director who oversees both, but they're 2 standalone departments.
The housing and urban development paperwork that you've already told us is a daunting task. And is that position filled now?
No,
And who is doing that in the interim?
Oh, me,
Yeah.
sorry.
and that would fall under community development.
Yeah,
That would go
yeah.
community.
It would go right under the Planning and Zoning Division of Community Development. Mhm.
Now, will we bring in somebody to this position new, or will we promote somebody within our system?
The position's already on the books and we will simply have to post an ad to
Could
fill the
advertise
position.
it.
It's already funded in this year's budget.
Not that he's talking about which are you talking about, the
Housing
housing
planner.
planner or you're talking about the housing planner?
Yes.
Okay, we'll be advertising that.
One more thing.
Go ahead.
Just actually on a follow-up from Terry, and I'm probably going to direct it at the sheriff. Because you talked about the increase. I mean, Chris, part of the increase in the sheriff's salaries is not totally incumbent upon the city of Staunton, correct? I mean, part of that is from, and I'll get the moniker wrong, but JCAH, whatever, I don't know, one of those that they pay a certain portion of your salary.
The
So that,
compensation board,
yeah, thank you.
right, that's true. The compensation board does pay a portion of constitutional officer salaries, but the sheriff is also on the city's pay plan. So
Right,
they
right.
receive everything, whatever city employees receive, they
They get the
receive.
same
But
thing.
you're right, we are reimbursed as a city
Right.
for a portion of their budget, including
Okay.
salaries.
Okay. All right.
It's not much.
Well, it's never enough.
Never
I mean,
enough,
no, but
yeah.
okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, just so that, but in which we're not paying every dime of it, whatever.
Let me just have a follow-up question, as long as we've got Chris here. Assuming that we're currently sharing our sheriff responsibilities with Augusta County because we have a joint court venture, what are we looking at if we have to staff this by the city, by
Yeah.
ourselves?
Specifically the J&D court.
Yeah.
And how many do you have total right now? How many are you gonna need to do what you're covering now plus additional court?
So currently my office has 10 folks from myself down, which includes a secretary and a part-time. Looking forward, there's still some discussion in terms of ideal versus what we can do to make it if you will, as far as the new J&D court. At a minimum, to answer your question bluntly, absolute minimum, I'm looking at needing at least 5. Absolute minimum
At the new facility.
at the new facility. Yes, sir.
All right. And none of that would be on the 24 budget?
Correct.
It's going to be on the 25 budget. Okay.
That's one of those long-term issues we definitely need to think about as we even move through this budget, because that's a given. And as Sheriff Hartless said, we haven't wrapped ourselves around completely what the operational costs
Absolutely.
will be. So we'll be starting those discussions soon, really
ma'am.
soon.
And the funding of those positions is entirely on the city.
Yes. Correct.
Correct.
So the compensation
Compensation
board
board.
would not cover any of that?
No, sir, they
They
would
would
not.
continue to cover your portion,
Correct.
but not the new position.
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so
And even though we're not covering, we won't be covering the county's courts anymore, they'll still need the same amount of people to take care of things in the Cochran building.
Yes, within the Cochran building, yes, I will.
So I'm curious, why does the compensation board, even though it's a new facility, is it just because they say, City of Staunton, you have a population of this and you're allotted so many people?
In short, yes, that's a piece of it. The comp board has a factoring scale, if you will, that they use to determine, okay, you have this many court days, this many judges, this many papers, et cetera.
Mhm.
Based on those numbers, because we're still counting or currently counting the juvenile court cases that we have.
Mhm.
All of that factors in, and the comp board puts all that together, does their equation and says, okay, these are the number of deputies you need based on these numbers. So what we're looking at in short, without getting really in depth, is we're still going to have the juvenile court days, the juvenile court papers, et cetera, that we currently have. But we're going to pick up additional responsibilities with a new standalone facility, hypothetically, to cover roles that we're not covering currently, such as access points. And depending on how the judges separate and determine how many days a week they're going to run, if we're still running 5 days plus picking up the additional spots that, quite honestly, we rely on Augusta County to cover because it's their building, then they're going to be new positions as required for those.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, anybody else? I got one thing I just shared with my fellow council members, a 10-year look at our budgets. And, you know, if you go back to 2013, we were less than 100 million for our total city budget, 96 million. Then we went in 2014, we went to 100 million. 2015 we went to 102, 104 in 2016, 106 in 2017, 2018 went to 110, 2019 went to 113, 2020 we posted at 119.9, which is virtually 120,000, and then COVID hit. It was a disaster. It fell off the next year, and we dropped to 114. And then we came roaring back. In 2022, we came to 131 million. In 2023, we passed a budget by this austere group of 142 million, and now we have a proposal of 152 million. So my point is we're going up 10, $11 million a year. And we do not have a population that is growing commensurate. I am very concerned about this budget because it's big, folks. And does this mean that we assume next year in 25, since we're going to have to be funding the sheriff's department for 5 more employees, and we can't seem to get it to less than $10 million jump. So what's next year gonna be? If we have to build a
70.
courthouse, are we gonna be 165, 170? I'm concerned. I think this is a huge jump. I read all those numbers where we were 100, 110 for many, many years. And suddenly, from 2020, we've gone from $120 million a year to run this city to 152 million. Now, I have not gone through the whole book yet. We haven't had an opportunity, but we need to look at this very cautiously. I do not think we want to jump up and down and say, this is fine, let's rubber stamp it. I think we need to really analyze this and see that there's a dangerous trend here by increasing $10 million every year. So.
Well, I would say a good bit of that is probably the high school. Reason our budget jumped quite a bit. And if, I don't think the payments didn't come online to that. Was it 2019? We actually,
we're happy to break down for you.
but I think that's a big chunk of why it's gone up. But also, wages have gone up and the cost of doing business, just the cost of buying anything. When I paid $20 some for prime rib a pound, when I used to pay $8 a pound before COVID, and it hasn't come back down. And that's meat, but it's that way with everything. Just parts that you used to buy for equipment that would cost $75 went up to $300 or $400. And a lot of it's things like circuit boards or just pieces you need to put into things. So I know it's a lot of money, but we also got to make sure that we're not cutting ourselves to the bone, because we cut it too low, then it's going to, we got to worry about getting Staunton Crossing done. If we could get that off our books, we'd be breathing life.
Absolutely.
And I think that, but that should be one of our major, because it's hard for us to do anything in the West End. It's hard for us to do anything in Uniontown. And raises and benefits and all that stuff's going to get more expensive as we go along. And we can't compete with the private sector if we don't pay our employees a decent salary.
Well, but Terry, I agree with fully what you just said, but then again, and it's the old adage, you're starting to chase your tail, because, if we were growing by 5,000-6,000 people in this city every year, or 2,000 people, then we start having a tax base to come off of. But we can only ask the citizens so much out of their pocket before they start going elsewhere across the border. And then you start doing more with less and in less and in less.
So
I mean,
I think by bringing Staunton Crossing online, it would help our whole tax base.
I
Without a
agree.
doubt, we're all,
Agree on that.
and we all ran on that. And unfortunately, it's been numerous years.
Well, just to put water, we got sewer, supposedly we got enough for sewer, but just to put water and a water tower out there, that's another $7.5–8 million.
Correct. And hopefully that'll be funded by a state grant.
hope, but
The sewer,
You can't.
the sewer was funded
bank
by.
on that.
We can't bank on it, but at the same time, we'll be dependent upon an eventual tenant or developer who will know what their needs are. And we have water capable of getting to the site. We don't know how much we're going to need.
But we wouldn't have, without a water tower, we won't have water
Claffey.
pressure, and that'll affect not just Staunton Crossing, that affects that whole side of town.
East side of town. Yeah.
If you can't put a fire out because you don't have any water pressure, that's
Well,
a big problem too.
And I'm sure Chief Carver will tell us that.
Sure. Ms. Barber, could you, we know, we've heard, but we know that revenue neutral is at what for the city?
The rate,
Mhm.
74 cents.
And can you explain what that actually means so people understand? Because we know that 74 cents, that's like having a magic wand and, you know, being able to,
What it means for taxpayers?
yes, yes.
So at 74 cents, it means that even with the assessment increase, you would not pay any additional taxes on your property.
So,
So, yeah, so if you go anything above that, property owners will still pay more than they did last year.
Yep.
Because of the value of their home.
right.
Basically, our inflation rate for the cost of living for Social Security last year was 8.7%, I believe, 8.8.
Something like that.
Yeah. So that's an
This-
18-cent difference, right?
Correct.
Yes.
From
18
92
From
to
where we
74.
are to where, you know, revenue neutral.
Up to where we, yeah, or
And-
down to 74.
And with this proposed budget, we're lowering, you're proposing to lower the tax rate 3 cents,
Correct.
but that's still a long ways from the 74 cents.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but you know, we need to
Thank
make a
you.
list of what we're not going to be able to provide to people so they know that what the city can't provide to them if we cut these tax rates.
We don't
Yeah.
know that yet, Terry, and let's not use the word cut when we're increasing the number of tax dollars. Let's keep this in mind. We are expanding the city's revenues. We are going to be paying more dollars, hopefully for more services. So let's not automatically jump to the fact that just because we didn't go to some pie in the sky number that we're cutting. The pie in the sky number is here. We are still raising every point up to that. We're increasing the dollars that we are spending on city functions. But anyway, another figure I did today, I took an average house in Staunton and multiplied it by 92 cents, by 89 cents, by 85 cents, and by 74 cents.
Mhm.
And if you go to the 89 cents on a typical house, you're looking at a 20% tax increase. The cost of living increase last year for Social Security was 8.9%. So, I mean, if you are talking to a citizen who's living off Social Security and they're getting an 8.9% increase, and then we're turning around and charging them twice as much for the privilege of living in the city, it soon becomes a matter they don't want to live in the city and they go to the county where they pay 63 cents.
Well, so
What is that 20%? What's the dollar amount? What does that average out to be?
All right,
And how
on a
much is that?
typical house that I
Yeah.
took, I came up with, it was $325 more.
So that's
A year.
roughly $27, $28 a month or a month
More.
more.
Well,
And
and
that's paying to make sure your garbage is picked up, which is going to cost more. Make sure that, you know, we have.
Oh,
police
gasoline
and-
alone.
I mean, just everything. I mean, there's so many things that factor into this that you got to take into account. It's just, you can't just look at it as like, we're raising everybody's taxes. We got to look at it at, they get these services for this tax, and they need to know that if we do have, what do we have? If we don't, our budget goes off the cliff here because of a recession. What are we going to do about, we're not going to open the pools? Are we not going to do, are we going to cut back on planning and do?
One thing we got to remember is
I'm
all of
sorry,
our-
I'm a bit of a pessimist because
I
I've been
know.
in business myself and I've been through a lot of these ups and downs, and it's and I'm if I didn't put money away all the time, I would have probably been out of business, and it just scares me.
well, Terry, and you talked about $300 some dollars. I mean, I talked to a friend of mine that is renting. And people say, well, okay, you don't own a house, it's not going to affect the renter. This young man,
The
this young man,
the rent's
his-
already gone up. It
this
went up.
young man is
Already
just
done.
got his rent increased by $80 a month, which works out to $900 some dollars a year. So he's almost at
But Mark,
1,000
Mark,
increase.
Those rents have went up a year ago or 2 years ago. I'm telling you.
they're going
I
up
know-
They're
again.
going
I know,
up
but I'm just
again.
saying, these people, when
People
they
have
thought we
places
were gonna
like that.
raise taxes before the last year, everybody jacked their rates up and they never came back down. And there's such a demand for rental property. There's a friend of mine's a real estate agent. He says there's roughly about 25 homes for sale in the city.
And that's it.
That's why the assessments went up so high, is because of demand.
Correct.
And the same thing goes on for rental property. I know a lot of people, a lot of my employees who can't afford $1,000 a month, and they end up having to move to the county. But you know what? There's a finite amount of rental space in town. And unless we build something in town that can accommodate these people, that's not going to change. And those rates are going to stay high no matter what, because there's a demand for it. So, I mean, we got to look out for what we got to take care of as far as being city council people. We need to make sure that we have enough money to operate the government without putting it in a hole.
Correct.
And we're
Speaking of
talking about just if we left the rate now, we're talking about $1.2 million that will be in a deficit, and if you take it down to 89 cents, I think it's around 2.8, 2.7 mil that we would be off. We'd start out in a deficit. We would have to make that up. Hopefully we'd make it up and increase sales, increase meals tax and stuff like that.
Yep.
But I wouldn't count on that this year. The last 2 years when it went up so high, everybody was spending money at Lowe's and redoing their homes. And that's part of the reasons their assessments went up, is they did all these improvements to their homes. So it's I don't know, I sound like I'm anxious, but I am a little bit, because it worries me a little bit that we talk about 74 cent or 85 cents. Those seem just way off the chart for me.
I'm not saying
Alright.
but like I said, right now, I'm more worried about, you and I are blessed. We probably can afford these taxes, but there's a lot of citizens right now in the city of Staunton that can't. And that's just point blank.
Yeah, but there's also aid for a lot of people who are really lower income,
Yeah.
That's
I
true.
mean, there's some stuff out there. I mean, Maggie's department can offer money. Was it 79 if you make under 79,000 a year or something, or 70,000 for 2 people? Yeah. And I mean that there are people can qualify for that money. And then
I see what you're saying. I'm going to call the time deadline on this thing. We're,
Mayor Claffey, I know you want to call time. I just want to say, so you've given us a lot of great information to get ready for our first work session.
Good.
And please email us with any questions if you didn't get a chance to ask tonight, and we will send out responses in advance of the work session. And if we need to hold some for the work session, we'll do that too, but we'll try as hard as we can to get answers out before the work session. And if you think of anything else in the meantime, let us know, but I think we have a good idea of what our agenda needs to look like for that work session on the 6th.
very
So I'll
good.
leave it at
Thanks.
that.
And everybody needs to go home and look at it and read it over. And it's serious business. We really got to get worried about this. And I
Agreed.
thank everybody for their opinions. And nothing is set yet. And nothing will be set until April 27th.
Can we take a vote? Yeah.
So it's a work in progress. And with that, I'm going to wrap that up, only 10 minutes too late, maybe 15. And let me go to item 3 on the agenda, which is a discussion about establishment of a housing commission.
Thank you. And this
Better than Mr.
directly,
Garwood.
yeah, thank you very much,
Yes, you're
Ms.
welcome.
Beauregard. This directly links into what we've just been talking about as well. Now, over the last few years, my work with Habitat and talking to community members and private organizations as well. And I've had a chance to talk to, I think, each of you along the way, some more so than others, about, it's a nationwide crisis, housing and the price of housing compared to average incomes, teachers, police workers and all that as well. And there's a definite disconnect between the cost of entry-level housing prices and our area income levels. Now, I just want to start the conversation about creation of an advisory committee or a commission with the city, because the most effective way, in my experience with this, is, Terry was talking about, we've got to create more housing for people, but that's not us. We don't do that. That is not a municipal action on that. That is private industry. And it's not worth their while to do it for full income, for full what they can get for it. Now, a big part of this is to connect private builders with state and federal grant funding as well, to make it worth their while, to create housing that could be offered below market rate, because out in the open, they're going to get whatever they can get for it. Now, there's a number of different things going on. There's a lot in the county as well for federal funding is being offered to private builders to offer some of these new houses and new townhouses below market rate to that. And that is trackable for who they're offering it to. Often to people making 30 to 80% of the average area income is typically the target area on that. Now, I would like us to more directly be involved in this, to have an advisory committee or a commission. I'm definitely open about what form that would take, of local experts that could help establish the needs, talk directly with community members, different organization members, things like the Community Foundation, VCSB, Habitat, where I came from, and that to find out specific needs, more effective ways to do this. I would like this commission or advisory committee to connect state and federal grant funding with private builders who, I mean, in Habitat, we were thrilled when we were able to build 6 houses one year. Oh boy. And now that felt like a drop in the bucket. Now it's definitely something, and we're doing a lot, but so much more can be done by the private builders who are so much more efficient and are doing this every day and making this more worthwhile for them to do. I think that there are things that we can do along the lines of opportunity zones for areas that we would like to offer this. We would like to build back up. Mayor, you and I talked about the idea of infill housing within the city. In my experience in building houses in the city, there's in a lot of neighborhoods, there's, newer house, nice house that looks like it's termites holding hands. And it's 7 grandkids that don't even live here that own the house, and it's behind on taxes. And we'd like to also maybe have part of this being finding ways to move forward with that, so the developer can come in and build something there, and perhaps make that an affordable workforce housing situation as well. So I want to start the conversation about this. What do we want it to look like? What are the needs? What is it that the city can do to connect with private builders to make this more effective? Because we need this, and we need to do more. And various groups start up. It's very relevant for a little while. Some key person leaves, it loses relevancy, and then, it's a disconnected number or email and that kind of thing. I think something directly with the city would be a good hub for connecting private builders and the needs for people in the city with that. So we're not voting on anything tonight, but I just wanted to officially start this discussion on
Well,
that.
this would be a good time too, if we're bringing in, we're splitting Billy's job, that would be.
Exactly.
And really tie into that.
And I would really like it to work directly with the Housing Planner Commission as well, as that person gets more online with this. And we can it could be a more direct community interface for visibility and better understanding about what steps the city is taking to help people in this, because this is, people call it a coming crisis, but it's here. And there's a lot of people in need on this. Amy?
Brad, how many people are you envisioning being on this commission?
Well, I would like to see, perhaps local realtor involved, at least, and that has, that is directly in touch with areas that would be available in this. I would like it to be maybe interface with the planning commission to some extent as well too. But this is such a big problem. I think it needs its own separate entity on this. Members of local nonprofits as well that are seeing this, but each one of these nonprofits that I've talked to cannot do what we could do with this. So I'm definitely open on that. We want it to be not huge and unwieldy.
Are we talking about a board and commission like would be on the ones that the nominating committee is staffing?
Yeah.
And most of them are 5 to 7 member. advisory
Yeah, something
board?
in that range, because otherwise you end up with a crowd. And you don't want to end up losing it in that, and so many people can't make it to each meeting.
And this is something that the current housing committee, that wouldn't really play into that.
No, you mean the redevelopment
Yeah.
housing authority?
Yeah.
No, they more work with what we used to call Section 8 and housing that's just part of those official housing areas, on that. And this isn't really part of their purview on that. And I don't think we really want to mix them up in this, because Billy knows very well, the more you add on to something else, it gets more and more difficult to do what's in your
Okay.
official capacity on that. So I think it's time for us to explore this and find out. And I would be thrilled to hear from the community, anyone listening on Zoom or anything like that, specific ideas, because the best ideas come from the community being served on that, not just from us too. So I am very open to more things that we could address specifically on that. Obviously, there's so much that we can do, but there's a lot that the city cannot do directly, on that. And I think a big part of this is to connect state and federal grant funding with private builders and honestly make it worth their while to make this a priority within the city.
Thank you. Again, in a matter of time, I'd just like a head nod from members of council if they think this is something that's worthy that we should follow up with and continue to discuss.
Yes.
Everybody
Yeah.
in favor of that?
My big thing was, like I said, he said that it doesn't get too big, too unwieldy, whatever.
Right.
Yeah, and it didn't seem worth getting into particulars on that end right now. But but thank you all for showing.
No,
interest
thanks
in-
for bringing it up. And I think it's an excellent direction. And we all know that we have a housing crisis in Staunton already. So
Yeah, and I think we could take a big step as a community and try to actively move forward and do something about it as best we can.
thanks, Brent. Appreciate
Thank you
it.
for bringing it up.
All right. Moving on, and item number 4 is the discussion about city council town halls. Ms. Beauregard, I see who's walking.
Everybody just go
Mr.
ahead,
Blair.
Mr. Blair. Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Blair.
Good evening, Mayor Claffey and council. It's our understanding from the staff perspective that the council would like to start doing town hall meetings. And I spoke with Ms. Beauregard, but she's obviously got a little bit bigger issues on her table right now but I did ask her for her thoughts, and I'm just curious, given the town halls and that what you're thinking about, there's the idea of having a policy. And the policy, one of the reasons for a policy is this. If this is you wanting to hear from your constituents, that's not an official city function. And if you establish the policy that makes it clear it's not an official city function, then you have more control at those functions rather than having to follow very strict guidelines. Once you start to say, this isn't me as a counselor, this is me as a representative of city council, an official city business, then you have to start saying, like we do with matters from the public, everybody gets 3 minutes, we'll stop here. A policy gives you a lot more flexibility, and I imagine a town hall, you would want that to be able to say, if Mrs. X is at the podium and she needs 7, 8, 9 minutes, that's fine. If Mr. Y needs 2 minutes, that's fine. And I think the other real issue we were going to ask about here, there is an executive order from the city manager's office about using these chambers. That would be applicable if you held a town hall here. Now, what that says is we do make the audio equipment available when any group uses these chambers. We do make, again, the microphone and other audio equipment available. My understanding, you all may not want to be or may not be using these chambers. Might be using the gym over at the park or other avenues. Do you want to, as part of this policy, do you want us to make the audio equipment available?
Were you guys thinking?
Actually, Miss Woods and I have one planned. And we'll
Okay.
announce that actually probably in the,
Oh, you
but
don't
yeah, the room, ours is going to be at the Staunton Augusta Rescue Squad, which is kind of a
Okay.
town.
Oh, that's
And
nice.
it's a big enough meeting room, but small enough too that everybody can be heard and doesn't really need,
Okay.
That was a good solution.
yeah.
It's
And they
really
said,
good.
and for those, the rest of it, Staunton Augusta said they were excited
Oh, wonderful.
to hold those kind of things because that's what it is, kind of a city community
Yeah,
That's a good
place anyway. So
perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
I'll give you their number.
And we want to
Great.
make it
I'll
less
give it a call.
formal. This is
Yeah,
not a
definitely.
formal, no form. This is just us coming as, look, as Alice, but I am a city councillor, but we are here to listen to the citizens of Staunton.
I guess we
And-
would probably need some rules that we'd have to follow.
Yeah, so each,
If we do something like together, make sure we don't, say something we're not supposed to say. I mean, it's always, you can get carried
That's for
away.
Mark.
But
That's for Mark.
hold on for a minute.
No
So
swearing, no
each
spitting.
listening session will be specific. So it's not just,
Topic.
yeah, it'll be a topic that we're coming to want to talk about. So it's not just general, you come and just voice anything to us and say anything. This is actually what we want to talk about is the property assessment. So this is the listening sessions that we want to start now is about the assessments, and we want to hear from the citizens of Staunton.
And a policy, again, if I write up a policy that says city council members will hold listening sessions / town halls, but they are in their individual capacity and not in their official,
Mhm.
that gives you the most flexibility possible. And it would make it clear, this is not a city council event. This is a Alice Woods, Mark Robertson event, or Terry Holmes, Amy Darby event,
Mhm.
and would not be subject to all the formal rules that you would have if it were an official city event.
No Blair corny joke.
No.
No Blair corny jokes, but
They could be arranged for a price.
Give you an index card that you could read the. jokes.
I'm happy to
How about
provide
that?
jokes.
You can provide index cards with jokes.
Right.
Right. That sounds good.
Is that
I agree
fine?
with all of that. John.
Okay, I
Thank
will
you.
with
write
that.
up a policy
Yeah,
Everybody
thank
happy?
you.
that will
Yes.
make it clear your town halls and listening sessions are your events.
Is there any way that you think we could get an idea on how many people it's going to be? I mean, how
No
you
idea.
have a sign
Yeah.
up or something
No
like that, or
idea.
just,
They're just we're going to announce it. Matter of fact, it's on the 29th of March, coming up next Thursday, but
So
starting
anybody
at
listening.
Wednesday, excuse me, 29th, next Wednesday.
So John, if they're doing theirs on the 29th and we had talked about doing ours on April 1st, well, do we need to have the ordinance written and
No,
Voted on before
no,
we do
you can
that.
make it
Okay.
clear at the events themselves.
okay, thank you.
These
not
are
official.
informal. We're not here as city council. We're here as individual counselors, but not as
Yeah.
city officials. We're just
And
here
the
to
reason
listen.
why we have to let the citizens know that the reason we're doing it 2 at a time, because that is official. We can't be,
Right.
it'll be official if it
Right, one
was
of us couldn't
3
show
or
up. It's a meeting.
4.
Right.
So it has to be, even though we're doing the same listening sessions, it's going to be 2 at a time.
Right.
So you can show up to either one you want to,
Exactly.
or all of them.
Yeah, and that, like I said, Wednesday, March 29th, Staunton Augusta Rescue Squad, 6 up till 8. And look forward to hearing from you. And we'll announce it again in regular session.
Good. That's a great plan.
Thank you.
All right, I'll have a policy at your next meeting.
what time is that going to start? You said
6 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Blair.
All right, and that means I'm almost back on time and we are now prepared to go into a closed meeting.
Mayor Claffey?
Vice Mayor Darby.
I move to enter a closed meeting for consultation with legal counsel for necessary legal related advice and discussion regarding the order to show cause concerning Stanton Juvenile Domestic Relations District Court facility located in the District Courts Building at 6 East Johnson Street, Stanton, pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A7 and 2.2-3711A8. Consultation with legal counsel concerning a solar siting agreement pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711A8. And 3, discussion or consideration of the disposition of real property located adjacent to Gypsy Hill Park in the city of Stanton, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position and negotiating strategy for the public body pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A3. And 4, consultation with legal counsel concerning actual probable litigation concerning quiet title action related to property on Churchville Avenue in the city of Stanton, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the litigation posture of the city of Stanton.
That was a mouthful.
Thank you. Oh, you won for that.
I couldn't quite
All
hear
right,
you.
I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Kesker.
Mr. Holmes.
Aye.
Ms. Woods.
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood.
Aye.
Ms. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Robertson.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, we are in closed session. We will return at our regular meeting time at 7:30. Good evening. It's now 7:30 and we're gonna have to come out of closed session.
I've got it, Mayor.
Go
Mayor
ahead, go
Claffey.
ahead.
I move the council reconvene in an open meeting and certify to the best of each member's knowledge that only lawful exempt public business matters were discussed and only public business matters as identified in the closed meeting motion were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councilor Robertson. Thank you. Mr. Kesker.
Ms. Woods.
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood.
Aye.
Ms. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Robertson.
Aye.
Mr. Holmes.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby.
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, with that, we're gonna call the March 23rd meeting to order, and let's start out by doing the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And tonight's invocation moment of silence is brought to us by Councilor Robertson.
I plan on doing a Christian prayer, so any of those that would like to participate, please bow your heads. If you would not, you're more than welcome to leave or not participate. Our Heavenly Father, we simply ask that you be with each and every one of us tonight as we are here to do this city's business. We ask that you would grace us with your presence and your glorious knowledge as we take on the decisions that will affect this city for many years and decades to come. We ask that you be with us later on as we have to go back into closed session and make some further choices. Dear Lord, we ask that you be with each and every council member and staff as we do this city's business. In the month to come, as we take a look at each line item, as we prepare our budget for the year to come, that we would do what is best for each and every citizen that we were elected to represent. Dear Lord, we ask now that you do bless each and every citizen of this great city, the city that we love to live in and the city that we call home. And now, dear Lord, we simply ask your grace and your blessing in each and every day. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to the mayor's report. This morning I attended an EDA meeting with, where's Mr. Vaughn? He's
Out the door.
he's sneaking out the door. No, I was just saying that I attended a meeting with you very early this morning. You've had a long day already. And I want to thank the staff of the whole city. There's been a lot of them in here tonight. And we appreciate all the hard work they do and all the service they give to us to make these meetings run. And this morning's EDA meeting had one important announcement. We will be having an open informative session at the Blackburn Inn next Thursday night at 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. And it's in the Great Hall up there behind the Blackburn Inn. We had one of these a year ago. And it's a great opportunity to come and get brought up to date on the goings on mainly of Staunton Crossing. But that's what we're here to talk about. And it's an effort to just be transparent. Allison Denby is the chair of the EDA, and she's been a big advocate of this program. And I thought last year's meeting went very well. And I urge everyone to come back out this year and get the update and keep informed. Because the one thing that can really hurt this city more than anything is misinformation. So come on out and ask questions and find out what's going on as we attempt to solve the problems of Staunton Crossing. So that's all my report is. Let me ask for additional items by members of council.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Robertson.
Made an announcement earlier at the work session, and excited, really am. Councilman Alice Woods and myself,
Councilwoman.
Councilwoman Alice Woods, to get the right thing, Councilwoman Alice Woods and myself are going to be holding a session at the Staunton Augusta Rescue Squad, basically on the topic of the assessments for real estate tax. We want to hear what the citizens want to tell us about that. It's going to be at Staunton Augusta Rescue Squad in their meeting room on March the 29th, which is next Wednesday, next Wednesday, from 6 until 8. So we invite you to come and just tell us what you're feeling about the proposed tax assessments and anything about that topic. And so look forward to hearing from you.
Mark, can you please clarify for the listeners and those in attendance that you'll just be interacting like
Right. Yeah, this is only council lady, Miss Alice Woods and myself. So it's only two council people. So it is not an official council meeting. We have to make that knowledgeable. And so, yeah, we're just simply going to be interacting and, listening. And if there's questions that we can answer, if we're able to answer, we're going to. Sometimes we may not be able, because this is simply a period where we're trying to gain knowledge, and no decisions about the budget have been made. That won't occur till the end of April when we all say yay or nay on the budget. So like I said, it will be, it will be a period where we are there to listen. And if we can answer questions about what we know, we will.
Thank you. Other items from members of council?
Mayor Claffey, I attended on Wednesday, that was yesterday.
A long day already.
Yeah, I attended the DEI Commission meeting when they all came back together. For the last couple of months, their subcommittees have been meeting, so they have come back together as a whole. They are doing great work. They are gearing up for listening sessions from the community, and they are also gearing up to hear from businesses, which will be their business meet and greet, which
Yes,
is
ma'am.
April 5th
Yes. Mhm.
at the Stanton Innovation Hub from
6 to 8.
6 to 8. They are doing great work, and if you are a business owner listening or in the room, they will also have a survey. They are asking to have those surveys filled out so they can gain more knowledge of what it is that you all would like to see and how it pertains to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
Sure. Mayor Claffey, I would just like to share that I was at the school board meeting, the last school board meeting. And since my kids have graduated, I don't hear a lot about schools anymore. So I was excited to see one of our finest from Staunton High School, a young man named Malaya Cabell, who is a record-breaking long jumper. Mr. Cabell jumped 23 feet and
And a half.
and a half. 20, just imagine that. And so it was just very exciting to see him honored at that night at the school board meeting. So
Very cool.
I got to celebrate those things.
Mr. Mayor, I had the opportunity last week to go to the Boys and Girls Club celebration of the Youth of the Year. There was Omer Foster. Won that, got a chance to talk with him a little bit and meet him. And Ms. Woods and Ms. Edwards were also there. We crossed paths but discussed nothing. But Omer will go on to represent the Augusta Stanton Waysboro Boys and Girls Club in national events as well with that and going forward. But he's a very promising young man. It was great to talk with him and learn more about their programs.
Very good. Thank you. Anyone else? Well, thank you all. Everybody's been active here. It brings us to the approval of minutes. We'll start out with the special meeting of the February 28th and March 1st. That was the retreat we had. Does anybody have a motion?
Mayor Claffey.
Councilor Home.
I move to approve the special or the retreat meeting minutes as presented. Is that fine enough?
That's great. A motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Robertson. All right, now how about Mr. Kester?
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Airwood,
Aye.
Ms. Edwards,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And that brings us to the approval of minutes for the work session and regular meeting of March 9th, 2023.
Mayor Claffey.
Councilor Home.
I move to approve the work session agenda and regular meeting agenda as presented, or the regular meeting agenda as presented.
The minutes from the, yeah.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Robertson. Mr. Kester.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Ms. Edwards,
Aye.
Mr. Airwood,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Ms. Woods,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. Thank you. Now we have made it to the regular meeting, and tonight we're going to start out with a public hearing of the effective real property tax rate increase. And in a moment, I'm going to open it up in a public hearing. It is a time that council sets aside to hear from citizens and others about a specific topic. We ask that you please give your name, your address, and then keep your remarks at 5 minutes or less. When you reach the 5-minute time limit, I will let you know that your time has expired. For our Zoom participants, please raise your hand now if you wish to speak on the particular public hearing. If you raise your hand during the public hearing, you will also be able to raise your hand during the council, at the end of the council meeting during matters from the public. Once everyone who wishes to speak has had an opportunity, I will then bang the gavel to close the public hearing. I will now open the public hearing.
Mayor Claffey, I'm sorry. Do you want somebody to introduce this item first or?
Please do so.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but Ms. Moyers, let's have a quick introduction and then we can open up the public
All
hearing. if
right.
That's okay. Thank you.
Good evening.
Haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, it's been a little bit. So tonight we're here to conduct the public hearing, setting the 2023 real estate tax rate. As we reported in the work session, state statute requires the locality to advertise an equalized tax rate if in a year of assessment, reassessment, valuation exceeds 1% of the prior year's assessment value. It also requires the locality to advertise a public hearing at least 30 days in advance of the hearing date in the local newspaper. The ad was published in the newsletter on February 21st, 2023. In addition, the public hearing on the tax rate cannot occur the same day as the public hearing for the budget. As you're aware, the public hearing for the tax rate is this evening, and the public hearing for the budget is scheduled for April 13th, 2023. The advertisement for the public hearing must contain the following 4 things. The ad must include the percentage of the assessment increase, which this year equals 25.2%. It needs to state the lower tax rate to offset the increase of the assessment, which this year equals 74 cents. The advertisement needs to state the effective rate increase, which is the difference between the equalized rate and the advertised rate. This year, that equals 18 cents per $100 of assessed value. 92 cents is the current rate less the equalized rate of 74 cents is how you get to the 18 cents, which is a 19.3% increase. And finally, the proposed total budget increase must be stated in the advertisement, which in this case, we have advertised the ceiling of 6.9% in the general fund budget. The 92-cent real estate tax rate and the general fund percentage increase of 6.9% represents ceilings. And council may lower but not exceed these rates and ratios as advertised. Council, as you stated, is not scheduled to vote on this until April 27th, 2023.
If I may add, for those who did not hear the budget presentation earlier, the proposed rate in my proposed budget is 89 cents, which is 3 cents less than the current rate.
All right. Well, in that case, I'm ready to open up the public hearing. Would anyone like to speak? Come on, one at a time. Come on up.
Afternoon. My
Hi
name's
there.
Ken Schaffner. I've got property down off of Greenwood and Lancelot Lane. I received, now I heard you said it was going down to 25%, you said, maybe I read this wrong, because I received these 2 assessment bills coming up for 31%.
That was the average. 25.2 was the average, sir.
Okay, well, here's my complaint on this. In the last, from 15 to 23, I show a 54% increase in taxes, okay, on this. And I got this here. So I understand that the city works off of income tax, property tax, all these kind of taxes. But I sat in the earlier meeting, and if we're showing a deficit of every year of almost $10 million, I just don't understand where this is going to end. For example, you have personal property tax, real estate, machine tool tax, sales tax, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and the list goes on. So when I buy something, say 10 years ago for say $100,000, I'm just throwing a number out there, and my neighbor buys something today for 300,000, I'm going to get penalized because he bought something for 300,000. However, you have assessments that raise taxes, and I understand that. You have, or not, yeah, I understand that, but you have, when somebody pulls a permit, that's an assessment that raises taxes. You buy or sell a piece of property, that raises taxes. You have, I've seen the population double since I've moved here 6 years ago. And so that increases taxes, several millions of dollars. Okay, I went on the website and either I read this wrong or I have no idea. But last year, City of Staunton took in $24.2 million in taxes. Now, the proposed budget for taxes this year was 69. I mean, that's immense. So I don't understand that. I just don't understand those numbers, is why I'm being penalized for somebody that's coming into the area and buying something now. Yes, I understand. Somebody comes in and says, hey, by God, your house is approved, and it raised the property tax. But just enhancing my property shouldn't bring my taxes up like that. And I shouldn't be penalized because my neighbor paid $640,000 for his house when I paid $300,000 for mine. No more than the guy who lives in the house next door, who's been there for 40 years, and he paid $100,000 or $75,000, that he should get hammered for the same amount. You know, I have renters who I won't even raise their rent because they're elderly, and you know, that's something that I'm going to absorb, and I get it because they take care of the places like it was theirs. But there's got to be another problem, because, or another fix to this situation, because how will anybody be able to buy a house and keep up with the taxes? I mean, it's incredible. I mean, you've got 54%, and then what's going to happen in 2 more years? It's going to go up another 20. I mean, geez, there's got to be some kind of leverage somewhere. I mean, you're looking at $225 a square foot here, but you go 4 hours away and you're paying $87 to $150 a square foot over in North Carolina, and the tax rate's half of what it is here. I mean, I like it here, but Jesus, there's got to be a differential. Anyways, that's all I have to say on that. It's just, I just don't think it's right that I'm paying, because his house, he bought his house newer than mine. I'm paying his tax any more than the guy who's lived in his house 30 years. He has to pay my tax. I just don't see, because these numbers aren't lying. And if this city's in a deficit every year, there's a leak somewhere in the dike, and just, you know, patching it is not going to fix it. The spending has just got to stop. There's got to be a fix somewhere. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming.
Mr. Keskers.
No, sir.
My name is Mark Sims, short and sweet. I've lived in Staunton for 36 years. I've been through numerous reassessments and taxes being adjusted. Up until this time, I have never seen the taxes adjusted appropriately. They love that 92 cents. But we've never had a 30% increase in our real estate values. I'm sure I'm like a lot of people in this room, we're not expecting our incomes to come up 30% this year. It's just not going to happen. And our costs are soaring with food and gas and all the rest of that. It's time for the Staunton City Council to step back, maybe economize a little. 89-cent tax rate is an insult to every citizen here. Put it down in the upper 70s if you have to, if you got to raise rates, but you've got to stop spending so much money. That's short and sweet.
Thank you.
Mr. Kester.
No, sir.
Anyone else like to speak?
Hello, my name is Pete Center. My wife Ann and I live at 1810 Spring Hill Road. Been here for 4 years. First of all, thank all of you for your service to the city. I know it's not easy. Our taxes went up by 1/3 with this past assessment. We're on a fixed income. We're a blue collar family. We can afford to live here now, but if it keeps going up, we'll probably have to move. And I think are you spending 1/3 more money? I don't think so. So I think there may have to be some adjustments here when the values go up. Some kind of adjustment will have to be made so the taxes don't go up proportionate to those values, because values go up and they go down, and it just it's extreme. If you could figure out a method of doing it, raising at a reasonable rate, that would be far better. But the way things are going, the increases, we just can't afford to live here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hey, good evening.
Edie.
Good evening.
My name's Jimmy Kilborn. I own and live at 1816 Spring Hill Road. Didn't know my neighbors were here. But anyway, I'm going to speak against this thing that y'all are thinking about doing for a lot of good reasons. One, I'd like to point out, you're going to have a problem with optics come campaign time. As I remember, this council has been working on, let's get some good housing in here. Let's make it affordable for people to live here. You have some developers that are going to get some tax exemptions for putting in property. But at the same time, you're telling your constituents, your citizens, but we're going to charge you more to live here. My assessment went up 32%. Way over the average. There's a lot more people at the higher rate. And there's some problems with that. When you raise rates, when you charge more to live, you are selling a product. Live in the city of Staunton. That's the product you sell. It's going to cost you this much, but we're going to offer you less. You've got a problem with your recycling. You've raised the trash rate. You've reduced the recycling across the city. You're thinking about charging people for their size and type and number of trash cans. So we're telling you it's going to cost more to live here, but we're going to take away the goods and services we provide. That, if I was running against all of you all, I would probably make that a campaign platform. So it's very incongruent to charge people more and give less. That's a bad business model. You need to focus on the equity rate. I know the city manager would love to have more money. How did she know she was going to be able to ask for more money this year? 89 cents doesn't cut it. 92 cents was, you have to focus on the equitable rate. I got 2 minutes to talk about that. It has to go back to the equitable rate because my house is not worth $400,000. This assessment was made when the real estate market was peaking. You couldn't list a house for a day and it was sold for 40% more than it was worth. Well, that fell off the mark. That fell 2 months ago, in case you haven't been watching the economics of the news and things are going on. So you're using an assessment. In fact, I got the floor, right? Could I make a motion? You just vacate the assessment. You don't have to accept it. You have to do it by the code. You don't have to accept it. You need to focus on that 74-cent rate. You need to remember while you're sitting up there, it's for us. It's because we want to live here. But I can't live here every year. I got to pay more and more and more and get less and less and less from the services. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kesker,
No, sir.
come ahead, sir.
Thank you for being here. You're gonna have to bear with me, okay? My name is Timothy Edward Kreider. I live on 808 High Street, which is the corner of High and Fraser. I spent 37 years in the military. I'm currently 90% disabled rate. I'm on a budget plan. My question comes down to, what am I getting for this increase? When I come in and ask for curbs to keep the water from rolling down the hill into my yard, I get told that I'm being put on the list, which really doesn't exist. When I ask about sidewalks, which in the future I'm going to need an ADA probably driveway. If you look on my side of the road, I'm right up by the library. There's sidewalks all the way up, and then they stop. I go to the corner, so I'm not getting sidewalks. When I ask, is a tree on my property or on the city's property, I've yet to get somebody to come out and tell me where the property line is so that I can decide whether or not I need to trim it that's going in the road, or the horticulturist, whoever, is going to come and actually trim it because it's not in the electrical lines. It's, it's over phone lines. So again, what am I getting for this? So I do ask, if you're going to continue with your budget proposal for the increase, then I would ask you to also consider decreasing the tax exemption for the disabled veterans. The state has you at 100%, brings you over. I'd ask you to bring it down to 90%. Only seems fair if one's going to go one way, the other would go another way. So now I have 3 minutes and 20 seconds to tell you about myself, because I'm not going away. Yeah, it's Jimmy. We served together in the military and we know each other, and I would like to thank you for being here. I've lived in Staunton since 1996. Meanwhile, I've been serving, going and coming back. I have a master's in public administration. I've been to the Virginia training for Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals. When I was actually working in the field, the Code of Virginia said a public meeting was 2 or more. Has that changed? For Freedom of Information Act, is a public meeting 2 or more in the Code of Virginia, or is it what you're telling me, more than 2? I don't think so. I don't know. I'm just asking because it's been a long time since I've dealt with public administration efforts, but I am interested. I know that if you've got a budget and everybody's got issues, I will put this out. A officer in the military who has a responsibility for a country is paid less than individuals that work for employees of the city for what, 27,000 people? How many employees is that? A battalion commander isn't what, hundreds to thousands, and they're not receiving the same amount of money. So yes, maybe you want good people, but maybe you need to grow them from within. 1 minute, 49 seconds. Thank you for being here. You're being paid, you're getting a stipend. So it's not that bad. And it's nice to meet my neighbors. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
up, minute 32 is the next guy.
Mr. Kessler,
No, sir.
anyone else wish?
Hi, my name's Gretchen Bishop and I live on Institute Street. And thank you for this opportunity to comment on the tax rate. I really just wanted to give you some numbers. I did what Mr. Claffey said he did during the work session. I took a few housing prices and figured out what the reduction would be if the tax rate was lowered from 0.92 right now. If you have a $100,000 house and you were taxed at the 92-cent rate, you would be paying $920. If you went down to the 89, whoo, you would save $30 on your taxes. If you went down to 85, you would save $70. Now, if you had a house that was assessed at $200,000, you'd be paying $1,840 at the 92-cent rate. If you went down to 89, you would be saving $60. If you went down to 85, you would save $140. And if you're fortunate enough to live in a house worth $300,000, you'd be paying $2,760 on your annual taxes.
If you, that's at the 92 cent. If you went down to 89, you'd save $90. If you went down to 85, you'd save actually $210. I know you have a difficult job, and what you have to try to do is find the sweet spot, really. I don't know what that is, but what services can you continue to give us and maintain rather than reduce is a really important question without driving people out of the city because they can't afford to live here, even as renters, because as was pointed out, if you're renting and your landlord's taxes go up, so will your rent. So I don't envy you, but I ask you to really work hard to find that sweet spot so that you're not shorting people of services, but you're not burdening them with taxes that really will put some people over the line. My taxes have gone up. I bought my house in 2019. My houses have gone up over $1,000 based on your current assessment. My house went up 36% the last assessment. It went up 26% this assessment. You know, I'm really fortunate in that it's not going to drive me out, but there are so many people that are not in that situation. So you really need to think about every person that lives here, because I don't want to live in a city of people that can only afford a lot of taxes. I want to live in a diverse city, just like I'm sure all of you do. So good luck with your deliberations. And I really do hope that you try very hard to find the optimal middle ground there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Isker,
No, sir.
would anyone else like to speak?
My name is Susan Boyd. I bought my house on Thornrose Avenue just over a year ago at the height of the bidding war madness, real estate nonsense. Since then, I have not added the Taj Mahal wing. I have not done anything extraordinary with the house, and yet my taxes have gone up almost 30%. I did a lot of research before moving here. My husband and I moved here because it was more affordable. I come from Alexandria. I know a lot about taxes. And suddenly it's not. We are retired. We came here for a quality of life and a diversity, as some other people have stated. And I'm unable to fathom the methodology. You don't appear to have any sort of tax relief for senior citizens here. And I called the Office for Assessments and asked, you know, why have the taxes on my property been pretty much level for many, many years, and now they're spiking 30%? And I said, and I was given the answer, well, we have to reassess this every 2 years. Got that, I can read the code. I was asking about the methodology. I found them spectacularly unhelpful. I also echo some of the previous comments that there are far fewer services in Staunton than there are in Alexandria. And I just urge you, as fellow speakers have urged you, to consider the whole problem before going forward with this. Thank you for your time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Anyone else? No second time.
Sorry.
You can come later during
Talk
matters in
after.
the vote.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Wilson Faulber. I live at 318 Woodmont Drive here in the city. And all of you folks know who I am. You know that I've sold real estate here for a long time, to be exact, 42 years. So I'm on the front lines dealing with people who are considering moving to the city of Staunton, or whether they're going to move to Waynesboro or Augusta County. Staunton has a bad reputation. Unfortunately, Staunton's my birthplace. I love it very much, but it has a bad reputation when it comes to taxes. And so many people choose not to live in the city because they do not feel like the money that they would spend in taxes is worthy of the services that they get. So it is an issue. I can tell you, and if my real estate peers were here, they would tell you that they will, if we have a newcomer that comes to the area and they can live in Staunton, Waynesboro, or Augusta County, they will try to convince their client to move to Augusta County because of the tax rate, and will tell them, do not look in Staunton, the taxes are too high. This is a fact. I've dealt with it for over 40 years. I'm concerned about the proposed 89 cents. I don't think it's enough. People in the city are tired of paying so much in taxes. Understand about the budget, something's got to give. I've been coming to council meetings. People want. They want money. This is going to cost $10 million. This is going to cost this amount of money and so forth. But we have to reach a point where we say, we've got to take a break from spending and continuing this increase, because I want people to move to my city. I want people to move here and be able to afford to live here. I do not want to have to receive the calls where a widowed woman, husband and herself lived in the city for 40 or 50 years and paid their real estate taxes every single year. Now he's gone. She doesn't have the Social Security benefits, and she can't afford to live here anymore because of the taxes. You know, I'm not after that kind of business where someone has to move from this city because the taxes are so high. Something has to be done. So I encourage you to take a very hard look at this. And the reduction needs to be less, excuse me, it needs to be reduced more than 89 cents. It's too much. Based on this average for the assessments, I understand the real estate market went crazy the last 2 years. And prices are still going up in our area because of the demand. There are still people wanting to live in our beautiful city. And some of them coming from other areas have cash to pay. And it is driving up prices. It's continuing to drive up prices. This is a problem. But what about the people who've lived here their entire lives and are seriously, I've talked to so many people that are seriously considering selling their property in the city of Staunton and saying, I'm tired of this. I've had enough. I'm going to go elsewhere. And that will create a problem with our real estate market. The taxes will still be assessed by whomever owns it, but I don't want to see an exodus from our beautiful city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, sir.
Last call. Anyone else wish to speak?
Mayor Claffey, I do have someone.
All right. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, hello. My name's Kevin Hettinger. I live on 22 South Coulter Street, and I appreciate the opportunity to have to talk about this today, especially in regard to the discussion that was earlier in the announcement about the assessments by Councilman Richardson and Councilwoman Woods, because that I think is a little bit of an issue as well that I think everybody has already identified. My change in my taxes was over 28%, almost 29%. However, my assessment itself went up $60,000. And the thing that I can't figure out about this is I had a loan that was taken out in August of 2022, and the appraisal came back basically at the assessed rate of 220,000. So I think that the methodology that the assessor is taking really needs to be looked at, because that seems to be out of whack, put it mildly. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. That other than the fact that I would like to know again, where is the location of that meeting going to be? On the 28th, I believe.
Staunton Augusta Rescue Squad, the right below the high school, Staunton High, on North Coulter Street.
Very good. All right. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Wednesday, the 29th.
Anyone else, Mr. Kester?
No, sir.
Anyone else from the audience? All right. In the public hearing. Thank you for your comments, and please understand that the process has just started. Tonight, when we arrived, we got the proposed budget. The assessments go out first, and the assessments go out in January. The tax rate has not been determined and will not be determined for 4 more weeks. And we will continue to have work sessions as we work our way through the proposed budget, look for things that we can possibly change or spread out or tone down so that our expenses could be controlled. And we'll also look at revenues to analyze them, make sure that they're at their maximum. But will continue to do our due diligence on this for the next 5 weeks. And then we will set the tax rate, and your tax bill will be prepared in May based on the rate that we determined the last of April. So there is time. We are just now getting started on this whole process. That's why we're having public hearings, meetings. The whole point is to figure out what the population wants to try to answer your questions and to hear your concerns. So we're just getting started in the process. Please be patient with us. All right, this brings us to the introduction of an ordinance proposing a budget for fiscal year 2024. Ms. Beauregard.
Mayor Claffey.
Yes.
If I may, we normally don't respond while people are speaking during a public hearing, but just to answer the individual's question, Freedom of Information Act, if public meeting is 3 or more individuals of this body.
Thank you. Ms. Beauregard.
Yes, Mayor Clappy, thank you. Jesse Moyers, our CFO, will introduce this item. And again, this is just the introduction. This is not the final budget. This, obviously, the budget will change between now and April 27th. That you are just making a motion to approve the introduction of the budget and nothing more.
Correct. Welcome back.
All right, thank you. The FY24 budget ordinance totals $152,355,651 and consists of the following. General fund, $69,264,351. Debt service fund, $6,162,277. The CIP fund at 0, as that's currently been cut from the budget this year. Blue Ridge Court Services, $1,416,752. The water fund, $12,725,117. This includes approximately $9 million of capital improvements with the hopes that almost $4 million could be funded with grant funding. The sewer fund, $8,601,500. which includes $4.9 million for capital-related funding, of which the city has already received notification that we'll get 4.55 million of grant funding for that. The parking fund at 449,340. Stormwater at $2,702,800, of which 2.1 of that is for capital-related storm restoration projects. Environmental fund, $4,450,069, of which $1,090,140 is for capital, all of which relates to the regional landfill. Education fund, $40,360,196. Cafeteria fund, $2,180,173. Textbook fund, $1,020. School CIP fund, $425,000. School state operated programs, $2,598,076. This ordinance does not include any proposed utility or parking rate increases for FY24. This ordinance includes a real estate tax decrease of 3 cents, which lowers the rate from 92 per $100 assessed to 89 cents per $100 assessed. The equalized rate calculated as a result of the increase, as you know, is 74 cents per $100 assessed. There are no proposed changes to any other tax rates. Council is free to adjust the amendment as it sees fit. The city manager presented the proposed fiscal year 24 budget this evening at the work session. And additional budget work sessions are scheduled for April 6th, April 13th, which will be a joint meeting between City Council and schools. April 13th is also the night of the public hearing for the budget ordinance. April 20th is another budget work session, and hopefully the budget will be approved on April 27th. The city manager recommends the ordinance be introduced as presented.
All right, does anyone have any questions of Ms. Owens?
No, we talked about a lot of the themes in the back, and I guess this is the time to kind of inform the citizens of what some of this money is going for. I mean, y'all maybe think that we really are just like spendthrifts and just throw your money away, but we don't. And the cost of doing business is, it's like everything else, it's gone up. I mean, everything costs us more. You know, as far as what we make, we don't make much as being on the council, but especially not for the headache sometimes. But I'd just like to know that we really do look at every penny that we can and try not to spend your money unwisely. And I think that some of you think we're crazy, but it's not the case.
Mr. Blair, I just want to, do we officially need to read this motion to actually introduce it? Because we haven't done it yet.
No, you do not.
Okay.
You do not.
Okay.
Any other questions of council for Jesse Morris?
Sharpen a pen, Jesse.
No comments at all. All right. A motion? Is someone prepared to offer a motion?
Well, I mean, I will. Like I said, just remember what I'm reading is the introduction. We legally have to introduce it so we can literally talk about it. So that's all this statement is. I move to introduce the fiscal year 2024 budget ordinance for the city of Staunton and to schedule a public hearing on the proposed ordinance during council's regular meeting on April 13th, 2023.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you,
Terry
Councilman.
Holmes.
Mr. Kesker.
Miss Woods,
Aye.
Miss Edwards,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood. Aye. Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to item C, which is a consideration of revised council procedure memorandum. Ms. Bower.
I'll ask Mr. Blair to walk you through this item.
Good evening, Mayor Claffey and council. Before you, as you know, you had your retreat earlier this month and at the end of February. And at that time, there was a discussion about your council procedure memoranda. And what I've done in the briefing is incorporate the changes that were talked about. Just want to briefly go over the substantive changes. There are some minor changes, but the more substantive changes, you would be adding 3 new procedures. The first is your invocation procedure, and that procedure would, in effect, it sets for you the policy that complies with the U.S. Supreme Court rulings. So it becomes official policy. Really, there would be no change in the practice of what you do, but it sets the policy officially. The second new procedure would be concerning seconds. This is an issue that has come up since I've been in Staunton. It's come up in other bodies I've served. Effectively, it's your choice at this point, since you do have a charter provision, and at the retreat, you all indicated you wanted to have a second for anything to be considered. The final new procedure is the proclamation and recognition policy. Again, there are 5 levels of proclamations and recognitions. And I want to thank our city clerk, Mr. Kesker, for his assistance in writing that policy. To shift back to your existing procedures, Procedure 11 will be deleted. That procedure itself was very, I think, oddly worded, an old procedure. It's been combined into a new procedure that simply states the city manager should exert fiscal oversight over outside agencies. I think that's more of a blanket statement from you all as your procedure. You want her to monitor your outside agency expenditures, whether they're capital or operating funds. Another policy change would be the public hearing process. As you know, and I think any council or board of supervisors, clearly when somebody has a land use proposal and they're the applicant, you sometimes have questions. We've sort of had this policy that's unclear about what, are they really just part of the 5-minute public hearing or not? This would make it clear they have 15 minutes they can present, and during that 15 minutes, you ask them questions. They're not subject to a 5-minute. And what's also odd about that is technically, like we just saw there, if you follow the procedure for the 5 minutes, you're not technically supposed to ask the applicant questions if they're part of the public hearing. So this clears that up. It also clears up that somebody who appeals from the Historic Preservation Commission about a certificate of appropriateness would have 15 minutes to make a presentation to you. Two other substantive changes. One is concerning there's this odd provision that says if a citizen wanted to present to you, they go to the city manager and she makes the call, and she felt uncomfortable with that. So this procedure says if somebody would like to be on your agenda as a business item, and typically it would be a group, they need to come before you, matters from the public, and make that request. You all should make that decision, not the city manager, as to a business item that goes on the agenda from a citizen group. And then finally, it clears up in your budget, you do appropriate for council to attend Virginia Municipal League and Virginia First City events. This states if those items are appropriated in your budget, you don't need to have a separate vote by council for somebody to attend, say, a VML conference or First Cities. They have committee meetings. So happy to answer any questions, but again, tried to practice fidelity to what you stated at your retreat.
Thank you. Any members of council have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Blair. Thank you, Mr. Kesker.
We did decide to move the meetings up to 7, right?
It's the next one.
Next.
Okay.
Okay, so, all right, just dealing with the memorandum for procedures. I will now accept the motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move the Staunton City Council delete Council Procedure Memorandum number 11, adopt the proposed amendments to the Council Procedure Memoranda as presented, and adopt the new proposed Council Procedural Memoranda numbered 17, 18, and 19.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Woods. Mr. Kester.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Miss Edwards,
Aye.
Miss Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And that brings us to item D, which is the consideration of a resolution amending the city council regular meeting time. Got to it, Terry.
Don Blair will again walk us through this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor
Welcome.
and council. Very briefly, before you, you have a resolution. This would move your meeting time for your meetings, the regular meetings, to start from 7:30 back to 7 o'clock. It would be effective at your first regular meeting in May. That's because we will need to advertise the new meeting time. Happy to answer any questions.
Oh,
Well, wait.
I just want to make a statement that even though we're moving the regular council meetings to 7, that also means our work sessions might get moved up too. So I just,
Just move them back. a half hour.
Possibility.
Yeah.
so,
It's just so that people wouldn't have to, if they want to speak at the end of the meeting, they don't have to be here so late. So, I mean, we're still going to be working the same amount of time. So it makes it a lot easier for people who have constraints on their time. They don't want to be here late.
Also want to point out it's for the benefit of the staff, because the staff's day started this morning at the normal, regular, early hours. I was in here for an EDA meeting this morning and the staff was all here. So it just stretches out their day to abnormally long. So that's why we're attempting to move it to an earlier time. All right. Someone.
Mayor Claffey. I
Councilman
move
Woods.
that city council adopt the resolution amending regular city council meeting times as presented.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilor Arrowood. Mr. Kesker.
Mr. Holmes,
Aye.
Mr. Robertson,
Aye.
Miss Edwards,
Aye.
Miss Woods,
Aye.
Mr. Arrowood,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Darby,
Aye.
Mayor Claffey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thanks, sir. All right, and that brings us to matters from the city manager, Ms. Beauregard.
I have a few things. First of all, the 2023 season of Shop and Dine Out starts on Friday, April 7th, and will run through Sunday, October 29th. So please remember that starting on Friday, April 7th, all vehicles will need to be Beverly Street between Lewis and Market by no later than 4 p.m. Street signs will be put up telling you that you need to not park after 4 p.m. on Fridays, and they'll go up the week before Shop and Dine Out begins. Second item I have is the city of Staunton was named Tree City USA by the Arbor Day Foundation for the 27th year. And a proclamation celebrating Arbor Day will be presented to Parks and Recreation staff on April 27th at their council meeting. We have in town right now with us meeting planners from all over Virginia who will be in Staunton through tomorrow for the Virginia Society for Association Executives. And we hope they love their experience so much that they plan their future meetings here. And finally, I said this during the budget work session, but I realized several people in the room weren't there for that. The first budget work session is on April 6th at 5 p.m. right here in this room. And more information can be found about the budget on our website at www.ci.stanton.va.us/budget. But just go to our homepage and it'll be right there. You can also view a hard copy of the budget in the city manager's office on the 3rd floor of this building or in the library at the reference desk. So thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. All right, that brings us up to matters from the public. This part of City Council's agenda is entitled Matters from the Public. It is a time that council sets aside to hear from citizens and others about a wide variety of subjects. A copy of the Staunton City Council's Matters from the Public rules are available in paper form at the clerk's desk and online on the City of Staunton's webpage. You are asked to familiarize yourself with those rules before commenting. Please come to the podium or begin your call, identify yourself, and complete your remarks within 5 minutes. Would anyone like to speak under matters from the public? Please come.
Mayor Claffey and members of the council, I'm Maggie Reagan. I come to you this evening as your Commissioner of Revenue. And the reason I'm here is because I'd like to just remind folks who are listening here in the room and at home that my office does administer 2 tax relief programs. One of those programs is the tax relief for the elderly and or permanently disabled. That we are accepting applications into that program. We have approximately 275 residents that participate in that program on an annual basis. That is a program that is based on income and asset levels. It's authorized under the Code of Virginia. And a few months back, I came and asked you to raise the limits on that program, which you did at my behest. And the information about the program is available in my office down the hall in City Hall, or it is also available on my page on the website, the city website. And I'm happy to answer any questions that people might have here in the room this evening after the meeting. The second program that my office administers is tax relief for veterans who have a 100% permanent and total service-connected disability. That is also a program that's authorized through the General Assembly and is codified in the Constitution of Virginia. So it is not something that you have any options to make any adjustments to, but it is a program that I administer through my office based on the parameters that were set by the General Assembly and that are codified at the state level. And if anybody has any questions, again, I'm happy to answer them after the meeting, or you can call me in my office or visit my website. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie, for the clarification. Mr. Kester, we have anybody online?
No, sir.
All right, please come.
Evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Dan Gunnels. I'm a relatively new citizen here in Staunton, been here for about 4 years. And I've come to Staunton with a law degree and a love for the area and its diversity. I have a background in housing and I support a housing commission. I do not know whether or not, frankly, the redevelopment and housing authority exactly. I know there's an opening. I don't know exactly what it does, but I think a housing commission, we may take a look at, might want to create one. I think one of the reasons I was able to stay in Staunton was because I bought a house. There was no rental properties that were livable, frankly. I almost moved to Richmond instead of staying in Staunton, but the only way I could do it was to buy a house. Now, of course, the house burned down 4 months later, and then, but I survived it during the pandemic. But at the end of the day, I think that we need affordable housing, both for single parents, people who are making minimum wage, young family who are trying to rent in order to then save to put down a down payment for their first homes. We're not doing enough for Staunton to make housing affordable, nor to attract the kind of folks that we want to attract. I think we could do more, and that is basically it. And I think that this need runs across the spectrum of all socioeconomic backgrounds. So this isn't a need for one particular sect of our community. It's for all of us. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Kester.
No, sir.
Welcome.
Good evening, members of council. My name is Dave Metz. I live at 15 North Augusta Street. And I basically have spent a little bit of time in the last few days inquiring about the issue that you have in the background as far as the solar farm. I'd like to categorically state that I'm for this, but I would recommend that you, in the ordinance that you'll have to adopt 3 parts to that. Number 1 would be a performance bond. So for example, if the developer proffers he's going to build a 25-foot segment around for screening and he only builds it 10 feet, you've got some recourse on that. The second part of this is, I'm not exactly sure what they would call it, but I'm going to call it the deconstruction bond. None of you are going to be there 20, 25 years from now when this thing plays out, and there is a limited life to these solar panels. So at some point, it's going to have to get deconstructed. We don't want to have an eyesore out there of a bunch of metal and frames that's just sitting there rusting away. So please force the developer to buy a surety bond or a deconstruction bond, whatever you want to call it, to make sure that the city is protected down the road. These people are going to make literally millions of dollars off of this thing. It's a small investment for them, and it's a huge investment for the city to require it. And I think the biggest thing is the fact that there's 2 other sites in Staunton that have the potential to be another one of these solar farms because they're close enough to one of the substations for Dominion. So I think by adopting an ordinance that takes into that is very important. And lastly, probably to me is the most important, is put in the ordinance a requirement that they adopt the newer standards for the DEQ for stormwater runoff. This particular site is going to have over 50 acres of solar panels on it. That water is not going to have the opportunity to run straight in the ground. It's going to run off the panel and run straight down, and then it's going to run straight down to Lewis Creek. So instead of slowing down the water, in other words, when you build a new apartment building today, you have to put in stormwater detention so that it basically doesn't flow more than what it was originally. DEQ has adopted new guidelines that go into effect 2 years from now for these type of things. I think the city can adopt those newer guidelines right now, and I would encourage you to do so. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
Welcome.
This is fun. I enjoy participating. I got 3 things for you. Not related to, well, yes, they are. Okay, matters from the public. The reason folks might have to stay late if you all run late is because the public speaks last. If that's really what you all are all about, they should be first. Because dynamic boards that really want to reach and stretch and look for new and exciting things and problems that need to be fixed right away, they put that at the front of their agenda. They put what they want, the council would be the second types of things that would be listed on the agenda. And then the normal administrative things that the staff wishes you to accomplish that you are paid to stay late for should be last on the agenda. That's first recommendation. Going to offer a suggestion to help cut some costs, maybe. How many pay windows does the city of Staunton operate? How many places do you come in and can you pay a bill? I think it's 3, right? Isn't there a water payment bill out in the city yards? And there's a water payment bill window here. And then there's a tax payment window. Don't we just need 1 pay window? Doesn't the treasurer have software that allocates where all the monies come and go and da 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 da? Couldn't we save a little bit of money by deleting 2 pay windows? Last thing, focus on 74. Promise you. Focus on 74. That's it. Thanks. Had fun.
Thank you. Mr. Kessler.
No, sir.
Come ahead, sir.
want to use my minute and 30.
You're fine. No, you get
But
more.
It's very educational. Hi, my name is Timothy Edward Kreider. I live at 808 High Street, the corner of High and Fraser. There's an alley behind my house. I'm going to be 60 years old. I'm 90% disabled. I can't keep mowing your yard. It's the corner that comes up and goes along the hill. That goes up through there. I know that the VDOT pays funding for maintaining of sidewalk, streets and the whatnot. So I'm bringing that up. I would like somebody to come and take a look at the tree since it is Arbor Award, whatever it was with Arbor Days. I've got a tree that would be, it's been 27 years I've been watching it. My charges went up 26%, which came out to about $704. Let's put that in perspective. That's the equivalent of one check from the VA for 40% disability. I've already got two neighbors that are talking about they can't, their own limited budget and the price of natural gas has gone up so much in the last month that they're looking to sell just because they're going to have to move on. So lots to look at. Apparently, since Virginia is a Dillon state, folks believe that they cannot lower the exemption for the tax rate for veterans from 100% to 90%. I'd like you to look at that a little further. If the General Assembly can do it, why can't we do it above and beyond? So, and thanks for being here. I know it's long, but remember, every soldier and officer out there in the military works 24/7.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service, sir.
Mr. Kessler,
No, sir.
would anyone else like to speak?
You can't speak twice. You can't speak.
My name is Dan Gunnels.
One time only, sir.
One time only. Thank you.
Sorry. Sorry about that. Anyone else? In that case,
Back in the closed
Go back
session.
into closed.
Yeah.
Have the motion or have paper copies here? Pass that down.
we have to return to a closed session. We can do it?
Mayor Claffey.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I move to enter a closed meeting for one, consideration with legal counsel for necessary legal related advice and discussions regarding the order to show cause concerning the Staunton Juvenile and Domestic Relations District Court Service or facility located in the District Court Building at 6 East Johnson Street, Staunton, pursuant to Virginia Code 22-3711A7 and 2.2-3711A8 and consultation with legal counsel concerning solar sitting agreement pursuant to Virginia Code 22-3711A8.
Thank you. I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Robertson. We are now in closed session. Yeah, no problem.
I do too.